All right, so what do we do with all of this? That's the question. The first thing, there's several steps that we have to do. The first thing that we have to do is validate, okay? So regardless of your opinion, or whether or not you think that a person's lived-in experience is possible, it's really important that we validate their experience, okay? This is the basic tenet of empathy, okay? So not trying to downplay their experience or tell them, oh no, you totally are misinterpreting that situation. It's not like that at all. Because it is like that for them, okay? If they feel offended and they're impacted by it, it is like that for them. The second thing, so always validate someone's emotions. The second thing we have to do is educate. We have to educate ourselves and we have to educate others. Okay, so to educate yourself, it's important that you do activities like this, which brings awareness to your unconscious bias and your privilege. There's something called the implicit bias test, which is free. It's online and you can take it and it will tell you what your unconscious biases are. And that's a great starting point. And then also, we have to educate others. When we hear microaggressions, we have to educate others. And this is the hard part because it's uncomfortable. And uncomfortable is not always easy, especially if you have a hard time with confrontation. And there's really no best way to address a microaggression. You just have to do your best. Okay, and so I'm going to give you some strategies, some conversation starters that you can use if you hear a microaggression, and that could be a good starting point. Okay, let's see. Oh, okay, here we go. Connect is the third thing that we need to do. Connection is so important, and there are different ways that we can connect, and I'm going to go over that on the next slide, but get to know people. Develop relationships. Expand your circle of 10. Right? Think about the identities in your circle of 10, but expand that into other, branch out. And then finally, be inclusive. When I think about inclusivity, I think about obviously creating a safe, welcoming environment for all. I also think about using student first or person first language. Okay. All right, so here we go. So validate, I've given you some examples. Or I'm going to. There we go. These are things that you can say to people that validate. Okay? It's not helpful when you're validating with somebody to say, oh, I totally get it. That same thing has happened to me. Because the same thing has not happened to you. Everybody's interpretations of experiences are different, right? And so if I have a parent that has passed away, it's not the same experience as somebody else who has had a parent that has passed away, because the relationships that we have had with our parents completely different, right? The whole worldview is completely different. And so it doesn't do anybody any good to try to make somebody else feel better by saying, oh, I understand because this and this and this happened to me. Because then you're turning the conversation into something about you, when the focus really needs to be about them. This is a time when you need to be present, when you need to be silent, and when you need to listen. But you can listen actively while saying these things and validating them. When we're educating people, here are some sentence starters to say. Somebody says something offensive. Could you approach it with curiosity? Could you tell me more about that? What did you mean by that? I'm curious. I'm interested. Would you like to hear what others think? That's always a great one. They might say no. If they do, that's okay. Whenever I'm educating or sharing hard news to share, I like to give a compliment sandwich, which is where you start with something positive, you say the hard thing, you end with something positive. For teachers, this is super relevant. You know, you're giving thoughts on an essay that they said, positive, hard thing, positive, right? You did a great job with blah blah. Opportunities for improvement are blah, blah. But overall, you did great, blah, blah, All right. Connect, OARS strategies. I'm going to review that on the next slide. Like I said before, be interested, be present. Be inclusive. This is student first, person first language. Never say, my 504 kid. Because what you're saying is, all students on a 504 are the same. They're all the exact same kid, and that's not true, right? So instead you say my student with a 504. Okay? My McKinney-Vento kid. My student experiencing homelessness, right? So just be respectful of that. And here are the OARS strategies. So the OARS strategies are motivational interviewing technique. And basically, when you are having a conversation with anybody, about anything, it's really important to utilize these strategies that are components of active listening. So open-ended questions. Never ask a why question. Okay? Engage. Be curious. Give them affirmations. Help empower them. When we empower others, we ourselves are more empowered, right? We have a more positive day. Practice reflective listening. Okay? Give summaries. OARS strategies are so important. For the longest time, I had a little Post-it note. My husband made fun of me, and I had the OARS strategies listed out. But it was super helpful when I was first practicing motivational interviewing with my kids and my parents. All right, in the classroom, we have to be very sensitive. As educators, especially educators in an online environment, most of our sessions, if not all of them, are recorded and can be watched by parents or whatever later, right? And so we have to be just really careful. And if we are allowing chat to be open during a Class Connect session, we are opening up ourselves with the chance that something offensive might be said, right? And then at that point, you either get to decide if you're going to post the recording and not post. I think most people don't post. But then you also have the aftermath of that. And how are you going to address it with the class? And how are you going to address it with those students, okay? So as one way to address it in that moment with the class in a mindful way, let's remember we might have classmates here who are impacted by that statement. This seems like a good opportunity to review our learning commitments. If you as a school do not have an outlined expectation or rules that students are meant to follow, you should have one, okay? So in our district, we have things, and it includes, things like, being kind and things like that. And it's always helpful when you're addressing behavior that is inappropriate to fall back on the policy. Policies are going to be what save you, right? And then it's not, you aren't the person who is, punishing, right? It's the policy. You're reverting back to policy. And then more privately, IMing or whatever, could you share more with what you meant by that? I don't think you meant to say this, or I don't think you meant this, but sometimes saying this can, be hurtful to this group. When I hear you say this, I feel this. I statements can be really powerful and helpful for students to have, at the appropriate age level, to have students be a little bit more reflective. As I mentioned before, progress, not perfection. We're going to make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. Acknowledge your mistakes and learn from it, and then help and do whatever you can to help others learn as well.